You're never told that life could ever get this way. Chemo before surgery or chemo after surgery? That is the question. Before I get started, let me explain how this video is going to unfold. I'm going to share a little bit of my personal breast cancer journey when I came to this fork in the road. But you'll have to watch this video to the end for it all to make sense. So I'm going to share my story when I hit this fork in the road, and then give you some terms that the breast oncologists use for before surgery and after surgery, and then explain the benefits of chemo before surgery and chemo after surgery, and then go back to the story time. That's how it's gonna unfold. I remember being diagnosed. Just hearing the words, "you have breast cancer," was overwhelming enough. And then there was the hurry up and wait, hurry up and wait, hurry up and wait. My calendar was filled with appointments. I was wondering what was taking so long to get this cancer out of me. Like yesterday, I remember that there was a holiday and MD Anderson was closed. Only a very small skeleton crew was working. My attitude was, if cancer isn't taking a holiday, then why are they? So why weren't they just cutting the cancer out of me like yesterday? I'll get back to that at the end of this video. I promise it should make sense at the end of this video. If the way I felt is the way that you feel, I hope things make sense for you by the end of this video. So first, I need to explain what neoadjuvant chemo and adjuvant chemo are. Just basically how they're defined, and also some other terms that the breast cancer oncologists use in addition to neoadjuvant chemo. And then I'll explain who would have each of these or both and why. And when I'm done explaining that, I'll return to my story time, my journey, to explain why I had to wait. So neoadjuvant chemo is also called preoperative chemo or preliminary systemic chemo. You probably sense a theme here. Neoadjuvant chemo is chemo that you have before surgery or before your mastectomy or lumpectomy. Adjuvant chemo is chemo that is done after your surgery or your lumpectomy or mastectomy. Your breast surgeon is usually the one who primarily determines if you need neoadjuvant chemo, adjuvant chemo, or both. And it's not a cookie cutter approach. That means they're looking at your personal profile of breast cancer to determine if you need it if you need that chemo before your lumpectomy or mastectomy, or after your lumpectomy or mastectomy, or both before and after. Always remember that any particular doctor, oncologist on your team, care provider on your team is part of your team. And when I say your team, that means you are part of that team. Remember that, because some of the things I'm going to talk about, some oncologists don't even mention to their patients. And you have a right to know that certain things exist, to maybe change the game plan of your breast cancer journey, to make it less expensive for you, to make it less painful for you, to make it so that you have a better recovery time, all kinds of things that will help you improve your outcome. And so you have a right to access to this information. You have a right to discuss some of these things that some oncologists don't mention to people. So let me talk about neoadjuvant chemotherapy, which is also called preliminary systemic chemotherapy, which can also be referred to as preoperative chemotherapy, because some people benefit from having chemotherapy before their lumpectomy or mastectomy. I'm hoping that you are seeing this video before you have had your surgery, because you may benefit or prefer some of the advantages that I'm going to talk about. You don't know what you don't know. Hopefully what I share today will arm you with the knowledge that you need to determine if you could benefit from neoadjuvant chemotherapy. Hopefully by the end of this video, you will know if you feel like you should discuss this with your care team before you move forward with your breast cancer journey. Part of the reason that I do these videos is to help you become your own best advocate. And I was doing some research to make sure I was giving you all the possible up-to-date information at the time of this recording for whether or not you should have chemotherapy before surgery, after surgery, or both. And one doctor said, unfortunately, not all breast cancer survivors are identified as needing neoadjuvant chemotherapy. And I have also seen this in my breast cancer support group and other breast cancer support groups, that sometimes neoadjuvant chemotherapy is not offered to breast cancer patients, and then they have additional surgery. They spend additional money that they shouldn't have to spend. They have additional recovery, additional pain. You have a right to know that you might benefit from neoadjuvant chemotherapy. So let's dive into this and I'll explain why it can benefit you. First of all, if you are diagnosed with inflammatory breast cancer, almost always, if not always, that is considered an emergency, because inflammatory breast cancer is considered usually rapidly growing and aggressive breast cancer. So almost always, if not always, they're going to go ahead and recommend neoadjuvant or preliminary systemic preoperative chemo to get this under control before they do anything else. 20% of patients are ER negative, and most of those patients will benefit from neoadjuvant preoperative preliminary systemic chemotherapy. Triple negative breast cancer patients usually benefit from chemotherapy prior to surgery. About 20% of patients are HER2 positive and will usually benefit from preoperative preliminary systemic neoadjuvant chemotherapy before surgery. If you're considered a late stage patient, stage 3 or 4, you most likely are going to have preoperative neoadjuvant preliminary systemic chemo. That means that your tumor was 5 centimeters or larger, and also that the breast cancer has spread to nearby lymph nodes in the armpit. It's gone beyond the breast, but not necessarily, but maybe it has gone beyond the armpit, but it means it's left the breast and gone to at least the axillary lymph node. At the time of recording this, there are no indications that doing neoadjuvant or preliminary systemic preoperative chemo or chemo before surgery necessarily increases the longevity of an early stage patient, but you don't usually get surgery right away. You have to wait for various reasons. So sometimes your doctor will give you neoadjuvant preoperative preliminary systemic chemo so that you don't have to wait for something to be done to the breast cancer while you're awaiting that surgery. Having neoadjuvant chemo or chemo before surgery can increase your options for reconstruction, because if you have chemotherapy before surgery, it can shrink the tumor down and maybe even eradicate the breast cancer in the area of your breast. So that leaves the surgeon with less breast tissue to have to remove. So maybe you might have only been a candidate for a mastectomy prior to chemo, and then you have the neoadjuvant chemo and you are a candidate for a lumpectomy versus a mastectomy. Or it basically just, it may give the surgeon the option to not have to remove as much breast tissue, regardless of what type of surgery you end up having to have. Having neoadjuvant chemotherapy or chemotherapy prior to surgery can buy you more time for a lot of different things that you determine you want or need in your particular breast cancer journey. For example, having neoadjuvant chemotherapy buys you time so that you can have genetic testing done, and having genetic testing done can determine if you need additional or more particular types of chemotherapy and treatment that are meant for people that have genetic mutations. It may make it so that it might change how you think about approaching your surgery. If you have a genetic mutation, you might want to, instead of having breast conserving surgery, go completely flat, or have a double mastectomy. It also buys you time to, even if you don't have a genetic mutation, to think over your reconstructive options a little bit longer. It buys you time so you don't feel like you have to be in so much of a whirlwind of making decisions. I can't guarantee this, but if you have neoadjuvant chemotherapy, it may reduce your chances of needing radiation to your chest wall. That leaves me to explaining what adjuvant chemotherapy is, and that's pretty much chemotherapy that is given after chemo. And you can ask your care team again if having chemotherapy after surgery is beneficial to you, or if chemotherapy before and after is your case. So back to my story, my personal breast cancer journey. I remember being so frustrated to start something, anything. I remember being so frustrated that they didn't get the cancer out of me yesterday. But in hindsight, I'm so very thankful that I was blessed to have a very thorough breast surgeon. She could have jumped right in with surgery, and I hear that happened all too often. A surgeon doesn't order auxiliary lymph node imaging and potential biopsies in the armpit area near the affected breast, and they go ahead and dive in with surgery. And this results, again, like I've mentioned, in extra cost, additional surgery, and having more to endure. Let me tell you what happened to me personally. I ended up with neoadjuvant chemo. You might ask why. Well, because it doesn't make sense with my receptors. I was estrogen and progesterone positive, not HER2 positive or triple negative or ER negative. But my tumor was over 5 centimeters. It was 7.5 centimeters. And she did order auxiliary imaging and a biopsy of the armpit area near my right breast, the breast that was affected by breast cancer. That imaging resulted in a biopsy that confirmed that it had spread to my right armpit. And she ordered more imaging and MRI to make sure it hadn't metastasized to other parts of my body. There was no evidence anywhere else, so that's when my breast surgeon and care team agreed it was most beneficial for me to have neoadjuvant chemo, or chemo before surgery. I had chemo before surgery so that the 7.5 centimeter tumor I had could shrink, and so the cancer in my potential lymph nodes in my armpit could be starved or even eradicated. They ordered imaging throughout the middle of my chemotherapy regimens to determine if it was working, and I already knew it was working before I even got the results of those imaging orders because I could see it shrinking over time. So, what can you gain from my story, my personal breast cancer journey? One, that a good care team is thorough. They want to make sure they know as much as they can about what they're looking at so that they can do the best job possible in helping you fight your breast cancer. 2, this is your breast cancer. So just because someone else is or is not having chemo before surgery doesn't mean your journey is going to be the same. Each patient should be treated as an individual. It's not a cookie cutter thing. 3, you should ask for axillary node imaging. This may or may not change your treatment, but it would save you money, time, and recovery should they find that it would be beneficial for you to have chemo before surgery.
You're never told that life could ever get this way. This bill's a joke, you're broke, your love life's steal weight. This journey feels like you're in second gear, where it hasn't been your day, your week, your month, or even your year. But I'll be there for you when the rain hits the door.